Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. It's Alan Barry Labucan from Rocks and Stocks News, and we've got another in our series of interviews with executives from mining companies. Today, we've got Darwin Green from HighGold. Darwin, thank you very much for joining me.
It's great to be here. Great to be back talking with you, man.
And these shows are always based around news, and you had some news. I'll go over some of the highlights. 11.43 grams per ton gold, 25 grams of silver, 1.46% zinc, 0.54% copper over 2 meters, 12%, 13% zinc pretty much, 0.67 grams of gold over 2 meters, 110 grams of silver over 1 meter. And this is related to your big discovery there not too long ago. What was it, 500 and some grams over meters? So let's
over
let's
6.4 meters.
Let's talk about how all this fits together, Darwin.
Yeah, for sure. Well, first I'd like to just kind of establish the, I guess, context here. And for us, this year's drilling at the DC prospect was our first time to test any of the regional prospects on the property. As you know, we've got a really nice resource in the JT deposit. We're steadily advancing that, systematically growing it. Meanwhile, that property,
folks, that's nearly 1 million ounces at 10 grams per ton. That is not a resource to sneeze at. There's not a lot of those around the world right now.
Yeah, no, it is really nice, and it's incredibly thick deposit too, which is really attractive. If you're a mining engineer, it doesn't get much better. And so our focus has been.
Oh, and another benefit is you can go at it from an angle, so you don't have to go deep to get to it. You can come in with a portal.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. Yeah, it's really got a lot of attractive attributes from a mineability standpoint. And, as I say, that's, our primary focus has been growing that, establishing critical size threshold, which we think we're very, very near to, and POP's even passed. But at the same time, it sits within quite a large property that we control that has several other regional prospects, big visible alteration zones and showings at surface that you can, hammer off good gold and silver values. So, this year was our first pass at taking a look at some of those other prospects. So we drilled 2 of those. There's 9 plus on the property, but 2 of them, Kona and DC. So we put 2 holes into Kona and 17 holes into DC. And the way we designed the program really was as kind of this.
By the way, that DC target has a big geochemical anomaly that sticks out like a sore thumb. Which is probably why you poked 17 holes around there.
Well, no, that's right. That's right. So what we did last year was actually do that boots on the ground soil sampling prospecting. We found lots of new veins and got lots of chemistry, as you say. So it was a very obvious place to start looking, and it's got a really big footprint. It's about 1.5 kilometers by 3 kilometer sort of aerial extent where we see this mineralization of this alteration. Because of that, this year, we didn't know where the best spot was going to be on that prospect. So you come in with kind of a first pass, let's test a lot of the targets within that DC prospect. And from there, decide where you're going to follow up, if at all. So every last hole that we drilled this year, in large part, in part due to that was the initial plan, but also in part due to the very slow assay turnaround that's industry-wide right now. We didn't have any follow-up on anything. So that first hole that we drilled, we didn't follow up on it. So I just wanted to paint that picture that all of this was that first pass drilling. And, it's fantastic.
And just like any first pass into a big geochemical anomaly, you kind of do pretty broad ideas and you're not focused in on anything really other than the broad geochemical picture.
No, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. So, when you put it in that context and you realize we've actually hit on every single hole, we've hit incredibly high grades, with that 6.4 meters of plus 500 grams gold with another 2,000 grams silver. That obviously excited the market. It excited us. And it was a real validation of the opportunity there. But what we're seeing in that environment, we have continuity of good grade, 10 plus grams gold we've got in that environment in other holes. We also see very broad mineralization, like zones almost upwards of 90 meters of certainly low grade, verging on anomalous, too low grade. I mean, on a gold equivalent, about a gram, but sort of zinc gold. But that's really meaningful for us because it's speaking to a larger system. If you had an isolated little bit of high grade without sort of a broader low grade or broader system around it, you kind of go, well, does it have that opportunity for scale? And so we like that.
In all reality, Darwin, when you're hitting 6 meters of bonanza grade, that's kind of also another indicator that that's a big long-lived system that has legs to it.
Yeah, there's not a lot of systems that generate that kind of grade, to be honest. And so, yeah, I mean, collectively in isolation, anyway, you look at it, they're all positive results. Obviously, the market had expectations of greater things. I'm not sure what that was, and we're disappointed with the response in the share price for sure, as I'm sure our shareholders are. But we're incredibly excited about the opportunity at DC. It's it's sort of bargain hunting season, I think, for folks, because it's oversold in our view, but.
Totally. And Darwin, you and I come from a pretty good pedigree of explorationists, and we worked together, and we had some of the similar mentors. And you're like me. I'm looking for systems. I'm looking for continuity. And I always look at the distribution of gold in a drill hole and also around it. And you're even in these first sets of drill holes that were not targeted in any way, they were broadly looking around. You're already developing a nice little pod there of in the drill holes, the truth machine.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. It's practically right at surface, and so there's two things there. We're seeing continuity on a very tight scale where this initial drilling was, where a couple of these holes were. We're seeing broader extent of that mineralization, and some of that is totally blind at surface, like that 90 meters of about a gram gold equivalent. It sits out under these sort of much lesser, virtually unaltered andesites. We targeted that area, and lo and behold, you hit this big broad system. It had the exact same type of anhydrite alteration, which is very diagnostic of our main deposit 4 kilometers to the south. It's very unique. You don't see it in many systems the way we see it here. It's sort of nodular. That's very meaningful for us as explorationists, because it tells you we've got the same setting. And then by extrapolation, because you make a new discovery, oftentimes it takes a while to figure out what's going on, right? It can take you 2-3 years. We already have a playbook in that we have it at the main deposit. So we can apply that playbook to here, and we're seeing enough commonality. And one of the overarching themes is that mineralization is it's largely confined to a specific geologic unit. It's this dacite fragmental. I mean, I hate throwing around too many geological terms, but
well, for those that are not geologists, basically that's the package of rock that has the that's where you're going to continue.
Yeah, it's like rocks occur in layers, and in these kind of systems, the mineralization seems to want to follow a layer. Some vein systems will come up through those layers. And so actually what we see is there's this, from where this particular layer noses out at surface, we get soil anomalies, we get gold coming to surface, and that's where we targeted this initial drilling. And then it dives back underground. And so the next place we see it at DC is it pops out the other side of the mountain. It's like over a kilometer away.
Before that, you've also got it andesites above it, and it's bleeding into the andesites because you're getting at the top of the andesites in the sampling, you're getting gold up there as well.
Yeah, no, exactly right. It's like if kind of trying to come up with an analogy, but you can kind of think if if some snorkeler who's down deep, he's down there because you can see the trail of bubbles coming up to the surface, right?
Right.
So we know that there's a layer down there. We know where that layer goes, and we know that it's ore bearing where it comes to surface at DC. It's really early days, but we know it's got great jam There we see it there. You go through the other side of the mountain, and we're getting soil anomalies that are 4 grams, 8 grams. They're actually stronger than what we see on this side of the mountain. And we get float, so these are boulders that we don't find in source, but we know they've come from somewhere nearby, and we've had up to 180
Let's
grams
get a
in
little
float.
less geology. Those boulders, if they're not rounded and they've got some edges to them, it's a good sign that they came from, within 50, 100 meters kind of thing from where
Yeah, exactly. We'd like to think they're fairly close to in source of those guys, and coupled with the fact that the soils are anomalous. The soils didn't come from a kilometer away. The soils come from the natural bedrock close at hand. What we don't have is outcrop sticking out where we've got it, but we got all these indications to say, hey, that outcrop, if you got below the soil cover, is going to be mineralized. All of this is to say that is the same horizon that we see on this side of the mountain. And then if you go up and over the mountain, which isn't that high, I mean, its highest point, it's maybe 300 plus meters to this key stratigraphy. Elsewhere, you're a
but
lot
getting
closer.
back to your scuba diver analogy, if the guy swimming down here and the bubbles are making it through the water 300 meters, that's usually a good sign you've got a good percolating system there.
Yeah,
Boiling
totally.
water.
Totally. And exactly. And if you actually look at our plan map that we put out with that last news release, you'll actually see a concentration. And this wasn't due to selective sampling in this area, but along that section line, it actually roughly parallels some of the structures we're seeing. And there is a linear trend of these gold anomalies, a gram, 4 grams, 3 grams with nice silver, not always the biggest veins. So this is leakage stuff, right? There might be skinny guys, they might be this wide, but it's telling you there's a high probability. Can we guarantee it? No. But as an explorationist, these are the tools we use to suggest that we now have a well-defined target corridor.
For a little bit of inside baseball, Darwin and I worked with a guy named Bob Darney, and that was one thing Bob was always adamant about is, the difference between selective sampling and doing it right. Guys that go in there for selective sampling, they're really trying to promote their stock. They're not trying to find a mine. And, I know you've been a disciplined explorationist geologist for a long time, Darwin. And so that means more in some people say it than others.
Well, thank you, man. It's, we do try to do things right, for sure. And we definitely pride ourselves on our technical strength and applying good geology. Do we always get it right? No. But I think it's the right approach, and we've got a model to work with, and now we've got the capital to work with too. We're well cashed up now to go hit this hard. So it'll be really exciting next year. We'll be continuing to expand our deposit. The main deposit 4 kilometers away. I can't see any less than 2 drills being dedicated to DC now, possibly more. And we still have all these other prospects to go chasing. So it's a fantastic development for the company, and for the project. And try to put my thick skin jacket on here when the share price gets ragged on.
Darwin, you can't make all the shareholders happy all the time, but you're going to bring in some new shareholders that are, the ones that are getting out now, they're getting out because they were trading on a trade potential. The ones that are getting in now, they're the ones who see the big picture. And it's, another good indicator that you had from your news releases, you brought Peter McGaw on board. Peter is, an exceptionally talented guy. He found the mag silver deposit. That's now going to be the first or second lowest cost producer of silver in the world in a vein type system. Let's talk a little bit about Peter.
Yeah, no, actually, we're really pleased to have his, for him to sign on with us as a technical advisor. Really where we thought a good fit was there, and why we brought him up to site to look at things and get his take on the system was, Peter thinks big. He looks at things at a system scale.
District systems.
porphyry through the CRD, through the epithermal, you know, kilometer scale kind of approach, and looking at those big systems. And that was a big part of it, you know, trying to, because we feel there's lots of components to this. For example, Kona, you know, is that the big driver to everything we're seeing? I don't know, but it has a bit of that feeling. So we wanted that perspective. We're also seeing a lot more silver now over at DC than we were at the main deposit. He's a real silver bug. So, you know, there was a natural fit there, and very pleased to be able to tap into his expertise, for sure.
Well, good on you. And, you know, there's also a bit of a VMS element to the sounds of this. You've got what I'm really interested in, and is you've got a big geophysical anomaly. So it's kind of like a triangle. Down here, you've got the resource. Over here, you've got DC. And over here, it's almost like a triangle. You've got this geophysical anomaly that sticks out like a sore thumb. That, you know, if I was just making a guess, might be a VMS type system.
Well, it's interesting to see, you know, it is, we definitely are in a setting, like, again, to kind of go down the technical path here. You know, there's broad categories of deposits. There's epithermal, there's VMS, there's porphyry, there's, you know, etc. With the VMS, they generally form they only form in a submarine environment. They form below the seafloor. So we've got lots of indications that the volcanic rocks that are hosting this were formed below the seafloor, or below the ocean, you know, underwater. And we're actually seeing indications of alteration that tell us the other thing about VMS is the deposits form at the same time, more or less, as those volcanic rocks are being laid down. So, you know, some deposits can come in, you know, millions and millions of years later. Other ones form more or less contemporaneously with their host rocks. So we know that that's more or less the case here, particularly the anhydrite alteration. It's nodular. It comes from the seawater. It's drawn down, and there's a lot of sulfate in seawater. So we kind of know that that's the origins of that. But what's a little different about this deposit is it also has a lot of characteristics of an epithermal system. And so what we think is happening here is we actually think we're in a very shallow water environment. So you've gone from submarine to subaerial. Subaerial just means above water on land. Epithermal deposits form generally on the kind of, you know, areas that aren't buried under seawater. Very similar dynamics that drive them. And actually, we know it's shallow because we've gone from certain marine fossils right up to fossilized wood within our stratigraphic section where we were there.
Folks, think of stratigraphic like a cake.
Yeah, thank you. we need the layman interpreter here.
Exactly.
All of this to say is that we really got to keep our minds open to anything, you know, on this property, you know, and in these volcanic arc environments, you can get anything, you know, from the porphyry through the high sulfidation epithermal through true blue VMS. We have seen some true blue VMS. We have seen some true blue epithermal. There's some other styles of mineralization that there's certainly good potential for. And carrying on these themes with the VMS-like environment, one of the common characteristics of VMS systems is they occur in clusters. You find one lens, you find more. So yes, we think there's odds of finding more, definitely a long trend. Bringing it back, however, to Kona, what we see there in terms of geophysics is a real strong chargeability anomaly, and that's usually associated with disseminated pyrite. Very intense and very sizable. What we're seeing there so far doesn't have the characteristics of a VMS. We are seeing some stuff that actually looks more analogous to a high sulfidation epithermal system, to be honest. But we're holding back judgment in terms of what, you know, we need more information, but we did see some very interesting alteration, very intense pyrite alteration.
In relation to the resource and DC, is it?
Yeah, so it's kind of between the two, but it would be deeper stratigraphically. So that's exactly where you'd expect to see something that's more high sulfidation or something that's more closely associated with the magmatic driver to the system. So while it's between them, it's actually lower or deeper. You know, when it originally formed, you can think of, you know, stratified layers, seafloor, mountains here, you know, you got some VMS, you got some epithermal, Then down below all of that would be your magmatic driver that's driving this whole thing. And so within there, you can get high sulfidation epithermal. You can get porphyry as well. So there's that full spectrum
A continuum.
of a continuum. Hence, again, bringing a guy like Peter on board
Because
and
that's
kind of our
what
approach.
his expertise is
Exactly.
understanding for an epithermal system, you've got the porphyry that is bringing the juices, and then as it goes up, you've got epithermal vein systems. And that's one thing that I really started to think about when I first started talking to you about this, Darwin, is that it looks like, at least in these epithermal veins, it looks like they could all be associated with the same plumbing system.
Yeah, and that's kind of our overarching thought too here is like while we're 4 kilometers away at DC from the main JT deposit, it seems like it would be least astonishing to think that they're connected some way than to think they're totally separate. You know what I mean? Like it's more
Right.
plausible they're all part of one big system. Not saying it's one big ore deposit connecting the two. You know,
And
you
my
have,
gosh, if that is one plumbing system and you're getting that kind of vein distribution and mineralization and thickness, that's indicative of a long-lived system that was pumping those juices up into the cake for a
yeah.
long period of time.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. So no, there's a lot to like. So we're, it's in terms of what our strategy was when we started and what our strategy's been going forwards, it's all playing out very well. Do you always want things to go faster? Sure, but this, as I like to say, Rome wasn't built overnight. This business does take some time, some drilling. The key thing is we've got the cash to go out there and hit it hard next year. This is a really positive development for the project. The fact
Yeah,
that
and
you're showing
really,
these other prospects have serious merit, and we're going to get
really,
after it in a
Darwin, I
serious
don't
way.
think it should be lost on the audience that this was kind of like recon drilling. You're not targeting anything. You're targeting in the geochem, but you're not like targeting that high grade zone and trying to step out around it and down. You're just sort of poking around to hope to find something, and you're finding lots. So, exploration isn't simple, but now you've got, for next year, you've got the ability to target and a model to follow. And then you've also got this resource that right now at the valuation, I don't even think the market is valuing that resource properly. There just is not a lot of 1 million ounce, 10-gram deposits out there with thick intersections. And that's, you were modest or reserved in the way you described it, but you guys made a significant step out. And that step out wasn't like, a thin little intersection. You got a thick intersection in there.
Yeah, no, we've got some nice hits for sure. It's it is a beautiful deposit, and yeah, all this talk about DC, I don't want people to lose sight of the significance of the main deposit that we have. But our objective in terms of value creation and opportunity here really is to reveal the broader opportunity of the whole property. So yes, we're going to steadily advance the main deposit. That is the core focus fundamentally. But if we can show that there's another 1, 2, 3 other deposits that are satellite to that starts to speak to a very long life type of mining environment, I think that will benefit all parties, because we definitely get feedback on some. Some investors say, hey, why are you spending anything regionally? Or, and other guys, why are you doing anything on the deposit? You should be just doing regional. And it's like, I think when we've obviously internally.
You always have to remember, Darwin, you're an explorationist. They're a speculator in a stock. There's a big difference on how to find a mine. Their motivation is the stock price. They're not motivated on finding a mine. And to look at something in a broad perspective with the resource of thick intersections of high grade, Then you've got these veins over here with high grade. And I hope it's not lost on people. I've looked at a lot of geophysical maps over the years, and that anomaly that you have on the other side of the triangle, my Darwin's
Yeah.
triangle, that is big and it sticks out like a sore thumb. And if that's a VMS, now you open up the whole spectrum of, well, these things occur in clusters. And if you've got a big, powerful system over here, chances are you got a big, powerful system of VMS over there, which means that, you know, you're talking about things you find on the Iberian Pyrite Belt.
I, I like the way you're thinking.
Well, it's not, I don't throw that around loosely,
Yeah.
Darwin. That's a big anomaly, man.
It is a big anomaly. It absolutely is. And, you know, that's the fun part of exploration. You get to test these things. Usually they're tied to something, and something real. And we have others, like up at Easy Creek. We did some, that's on our furthest northernmost prospect. We've got another big IP anomaly that's being generated there as well.
With coincident geochem.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So, you know, part of the whole pipeline or strategy here is, okay, we advanced the main deposit. This year we went out and tested a couple of prospects. Other ones this summer, we were getting ready such that we can drill them next year. So you have sort of a full pipeline of other prospects to be testing as you're advancing the more advanced ones at the same time. So.
Okay, Darwin, you've been really good with your time. And before, I would be remiss if before we left, we didn't talk about Timmins. Because if they're not even valuing the resource properly and the potential of DC and the potential of the VMS, they're totally ignoring Timmins. And Timmins is known for the structurally controlled deposits. You've got two structures coming across, or at least partially across on one, completely across your claims on another. There was historical mining there with just fantastic grades. When you described to me the rock specimens that are in the museum, it reminded me of the days when we used to go to the PDAC, Darwin, and remember that display that Goldcorp had from Red Lake, where the rock samples were just full of gold. And so you've got one of those kind of targets. And the reason it was underexplored for so long is that these was a patchwork of claims that you had to consolidate. Now you've consolidated, you've got the structural story, you've got the secondary faulting, you've got the historical mining. This one, I think, is another one that could come up with some exciting stuff.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, you got a pretty good handle on the opportunity there. I'm impressed. But yeah, no, I mean, obviously, you know, completely different environment than Alaska. You know, we're looking for greenstone hosted gold. And really what we're focused on still, though, is that high grade. That's the common link between the two projects is the high grade. And with Croesus, you can't do any higher grade than what they mined there. It really was a phenomenal story. And we are looking to find more of that. There's also in the environment, though, there's a lot of big bulk tonnage systems around. There's 8.5 million ounces defined by Vanetta, just 10-15 kilometers to the east. There's something called the Fen Gib deposit that's 2 million ounces at a gram, that's likely to be 3 million ounces within the next 12 months. And that's literally on our doorstep. And so we kind of have the full spectrum of sort of Archean deposit style environments with where we are. And as you say, you're exactly correct. It's been grossly underexplored due to this history of being very fragmented, where everyone had these, well, one certain, you'd have family estates that had this interest in a claim that they didn't even know they really had. But two, they're all
reminds me of Nevada.
Yeah, no, and it's pretty neat. I mean, and really a lot of them are too small for anyone to do any meaningful work on it. You know, you're not gonna, a company's not gonna spend money or go after these things. So it was hard work, to consolidate all this. But I think it's very worthwhile. And Timmins is Canada's most mature, one of Canada's most mature mining camps. Certainly its most productive, producing over 70, I think it's close to 80 million ounces now it's produced. And so the opportunity to get these underexplored segments of that belt, that clearly there's lots of multi-million ounce deposits in the immediate region, support the opportunity there. And, so we think it's very, a fantastic opportunity. It's going to be some raw exploration. We're drilling there now. We launched a 3,000 meter program at the beginning of November, probably be closer to 4,000 meters before we shut down here, leading into Christmas. And then we'll get right back at it in late January. We haven't set the total scope and scale yet, but I'm sure it's going to be somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 meters. So this year, like right now, what we're doing this, since November, is targeting some undrilled veins, or largely undrilled veins, that were actually on our original core claims that we started building out around, right? So we're just doing stuff that was undrilled on the claims that we originally had. So our property position has increased tenfold around that. And so coming in the new year.
Is that where that big high grade original mine was?
Yeah, that's right. The Croesus mine. Yeah, exactly. So we're not targeting, that immediate mine environment. We're targeting other vein structures where you can get gold on surface. You can track them out for several hundred meters, but shocking that they had not seen any drilling. So that's the sort of phase one here. Phase two is now starting to look at that broader property that we acquired, which itself has lots of pits and shafts and historic showings that, as far as we can tell, have had many of which have had nothing done on it since the 1930s. So there's plenty of things to go chasing. Golden Mile is another one that we really, really, really like. It's actually closer to the center of Timmins proper. It's if you drew a line and through all the main deposits right in Timmins proper, and you stretched it out, we'd be at the far end, right where the pipestone break does a big flexure. And again, underexplored because it's under a shallow lake.
Let's put it in context for the audience. Okay, these faults, they're deep structures that go down through the crust, and they're little, if you will, cuts in it's like a crack. And these deep cracks allow the fluids to come up. And then as they get close to the surface, they can break off into these secondary structures. A good point to look at are where you have little bends and hinges, or in your case, on that one property, you've got two faults that come onto the same property, and then the one continues over to your Golden Mile property. So these are the plumbing systems, and you've got indications that that whole model has played out because you have this high grade mine and other veins with gold in them that suggests you're looking at something like an orogenic type gold system.
Totally. No, that's exactly right. That's a great description for it, Alan. And what we do know, bringing it back to the Croesus area, is we do have gold there. So without a shadow of doubt, that's your first, as a clue, as a geologist, to go a place looking, is there any gold? And we have an incredibly high concentration what was mined out in that little mine. What is fascinating on that property is all that work by the old timers was chasing stuff that was sticking out of the ground, right? So there'd be a bit of an outcrop, prospector find something, stick a little exploration shaft on it, do some mining. Well, 80–90% of our property is covered by swamp. Maybe not swamp, but it's covered by overburden. So none of that in the 30s was looked at all, right? And so do you think the geology stops when it gets covered by overburden? Not a chance, right? So that's what we're doing, is applying some of what we can know are the controls on where the outcrop's sticking out of the ground and projecting that out to these overburden covered areas. We've flown airborne, mag and EM. We've actually just launched a major IP survey across this whole consolidated block as well. So all of that will feed into targeting that. You're definitely not going to hit on every hole, but it's a great place to be exploring. And
well, that brings up another subject. In these orogenic type systems, you've got complex faulting, and folks, complex is good in this case. And by doing the geophysics you're doing, you can start to see those main and secondary structures. And then what you're looking for, like at Fosterville, is a swan zone. Like they mined at Fosterville for 20 years before they got deep enough to get that jewelry box of the swan zone. And you're not talking about a very big physical footprint. And all along the way, you have this complex faulting that cracks the rock up so that it opens up areas where you can get this concentration of gold. So the IP is going to help you to understand this complex faulting. But secondly, it doesn't look like you have to go super deep to get to the jewelry boxes, because the jewelry box was already found.
That's right. It came right to surface. That's right. Yeah. So
these things are deep, and right at surface, you're already finding a jewelry box. So if you can,
and there's a periodicity of these things too. You will see, multiple parallels or trends to these things. So it's small. That jewelry box, that specific type of target, takes a lot of drilling, but the reward is very worth it when you find it. But it helps when that drilling is not down 500 meters. You're able to drill in the upper couple hundred meters of the surface, right? So
absolutely,
and drilling is cheap, relatively cheap in Ontario. It's productive. It's a phenomenal place to, it's such a mine-friendly place in terms of this history. You've got all this experienced workforce, drillers that can, you can get a lot done with your budget. So corporately for us, it's not a big financial burden while we're working away. We can do very meaningful programs there and still represent only 20% of our overall budget while we're working in Alaska. For now, we'll see how that plays out with time. But right now, that's kind of been our ratio, and it's worked well.
I got a prediction for you, Darwin. I think it's going to turn more 50-50 because Timmins is a land of the elephants, and you're looking at something there that, like, where would you rather find a jewelry box, at surface or 1,000 meters underground?
True enough. And, the threshold, obviously, because of that history, because you got power and highways and workforce, underground mines in Timmins are like, a high grade underground mine is a 4-gram mine, right? So it's quite a different scenario there in terms of what you need to work. We're obviously still gunning for the big high grade sizable deposits, but you can get away with a lot less there. For sure.
What that means, folks, is that if you have a lower threshold of only 4 grams or 5 grams, it means that your underground mining costs are very cheap. So if you found a jewelry box and you get this cheap, now you've got massive margins. And massive margins are good in mining, in anything.
That's right. You can be selling shoes. It doesn't matter. Massive margins are where it's at. So
exactly. Okay, Darwin. Well, I really wanted to, last time we talked a lot, and this time we talked a lot about your Alaska stuff, but my gosh, that Timmins thing it's got my juices flowing, because I still remember those samples. I can't get them out of my mind, of the Gold Corp samples. These are deep, same idea of what you're looking for, and just riddled with gold. Like half of the rock was gold.
Yeah, well, that's much of what these samples look like. We've actually got a private collection where we have 5
some
such samples. Yeah. No, we'll start doing that. We'll start bringing them out, pull them out of the vault and show them around a little bit, for sure. Maybe on the next show.
All right. Thanks, Darwin. Let me close it up and we can have a little chat at the end.
Okay. Sounds great, Alan.
All right, folks. As you can see, my enthusiasm for what Darwin is doing is quite palpable. And the reason is that they're finding it with the truth machine, but I have a lot of confidence in Darwin. I worked with Darwin for several years. We worked inside of a group of very talented geologists. Most of them are out running their own companies now, and high profile people in the business. We come from a pedigree of really talented people that do things right. And that's always the way Darwin's done things. And I'm so glad that it looks like he's got himself something very important in Alaska. But I think this thing in Timmins is going to start surprising people when we start seeing what comes out of there, because it has all the hallmarks of an orogenic system. But in this one, the jewelry boxes are right at surface instead of having to go down deep. So I said throughout this that I don't think the market is properly, it had a big spike when they announced that 500 grammer hit. Now it's come back down to almost where it started. I don't think that the market is properly valuing the resource alone. That's close to 1 million ounces. That looks like it's going to get a lot bigger because they've already done step out drilling that will enhance that resource. And then they've got the regional exploration, the DC hit, the VMS story, and they've got this stuff in Timmins. So if you're looking for something that they do things right, they got lots of money, they're finding things with the truth machine, they got lots of potential ahead of them, and a reasonable valuation, take a look at HighGold. As always, my shows are for information purposes only. It's important for you to speak with your advisors and do your homework. And I really emphasize do your homework, because sometimes people trade on emotion. They trade for many different reasons, but the ones that make the most money in this business are the ones that can recognize value. And I think there's a tremendous amount of value left on the bone with HighGold. So have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.